The security guard at Gate 9 was eating mango slices from a plastic fork when he refused to let me into the place where I had died once already. That was how my second life began. Not with lightning, not with a mirror showing blood on my face, not with a mysterious voice calling me chosen, but with a bored old man in a yellow vest chewing fruit behind the wrong metal barrier, while 100 candidates crowded under a leaking awning and shouted that the national qualifying exam could not possibly have moved. I stood at the back of the crowd with my old admission card hidden inside my sleeve, rain dripping from my hair onto my collar, and listened to the top student of our cohort tell everyone, in her polished glass bell voice, that there had been a mistake. "Stay calm," Morel Voss said, raising one hand like a princess calming peasants at a parade. "The central hall always opens at 7. The gate officer is only confused." In my first life, I had believed that voice. I had followed it through rain, through a locked gate, through 2 hours of panic, and into a disciplinary room where the academy accused me of spreading the wrong center notice that made 43 students miss the exam. In this life, I looked past Morel's perfect braid, past the candidates clutching their soggy folders, past the banners that said Halden Civic Hall in the same green letters I had seen before, and noticed the one detail everyone else ignored. The exam seal on the gate was last year's seal, faded at the edges, taped over a notice for a flower arranging competition. My old self would have screamed. My new self reached into my bag, touched the fresh admission card for East Meridian Center, and stepped backward before anyone remembered I was there. I had woken up 6 hours earlier in a bus station bathroom with my cheek pressed against a sink and my right hand wrapped around a phone that should have been buried with me. The mirror above the sink was cracked in the shape of a lightning branch, and my reflection was 21 again. Tired eyes, damp lashes, academy blazer too tight across the shoulders, a cheap hair clip holding back the kind of black hair my aunt always called too plain to be pretty. On the counter beside me sat a plastic cup of vending machine coffee, a timetable printed in blue, and the old version of my exam admission card listing Halden Civic Hall, Gate 9, Seat D22. For several seconds, I did not understand why I was alive. Then the phone buzzed in my fist, and the group chat appeared with the same message that had destroyed me. "Morel, everyone meet at Halden Civic Hall by 6:40. Do not trust individual center changes." The board sent duplicate notices because the system crashed. I confirmed with my contact. "Follow me and we'll all be fine." In my first life, I had read those words with gratitude. Morel was the student council president, the scholarship darling, the girl whose face appeared in academy brochures under the sentence "Excellence is a habit." She always knew what to do, always had an uncle at the board, a cousin at the registrar, a family friend who could clarify confusion. When she told us not to trust our individual notices, I ignored the strange email that had arrived at dawn saying my center had been moved to East Meridian. I ignored the tiny official watermark because Morel called it a phishing template. I joined the crowd at Gate 9 and learned, too late, that a confident liar is more dangerous than a locked door. In the first life, missing the exam was only the beginning. The real punishment came after, when the board opened an investigation and found that the wrong center message had spread through my old study folder because I had uploaded the route map for Halden Civic Hall a week earlier, before the emergency reassignment. Morel cried in the disciplinary hearing and said, "We all trusted Liana's materials. She organized the shared folder. None of us thought she would leave outdated instructions there." I remembered the way she pressed a tissue beneath her eyes without disturbing her mascara, the way the other students lowered their heads and let the lie become convenient. I had not organized anything. I had made a single route map for myself, then left it private. Someone copied it, attached a fake board memo, and used my name in the file properties. When I tried to prove it, my account had already been wiped, my laptop already lost from the dorm inspection, my scholarship already frozen pending misconduct. My aunt told me not to fight a whole cohort. My advisor said the board hated scandal. Morel received a special rescheduled sitting because her father threatened legal action, while I was banned from retaking for 3 years. By winter, I was tutoring middle school arithmetic in the back room of a stationery shop, watching Morel's acceptance speech go viral online. By spring, I was gone from every list that mattered. I did not die dramatically. I worked too many nights, ate too little, trusted no one, and collapsed behind the shop while the owner counted coins at the register. The last thing I saw was a calendar with the exam date circled in red, mocking me from another year. So when I found myself alive in that bus station bathroom, holding the same old admission card and reading the same poisonous message, I did not cry. I washed my face with cold water until my skin stung, dried my hands on my blazer, and opened the official exam portal. The login page loaded slowly, each spinning second sharpening my memory until I could hear the disciplinary committee again. Candidate name: Liana Marrow. Application number: 117048. Security prompt: first institution attended. My fingers typed before fear caught up. The screen flashed once, then revealed the truth my first life had ignored. Center change confirmed. 4:12 a.m. East Meridian Assessment Center, Gate 3, Seat B18. Beneath it sat a second line I had never noticed before, because I had never opened the page after Morel told us not to. Previous center allocation voided, due to document chain audit. Present at revised center only. Candidates presenting at previous center may be marked non-compliant. I stared at the word voided until it stopped being a word and became a blade. The board had not merely moved me. It had moved a cluster of candidates whose files had been touched by a leaked route list. Halden was bait or quarantine or both. Morel's message was not saving anyone from a system crash. It was gathering everyone who trusted her into the wrong place. There was one difference I had not known in my first life. I could still change the change. At the bottom of the portal, beside a small gray button labeled Request Alternate Center due to personal security concern, sat a timestamp window that had closed at 5 a.m. It was 4:31. I clicked it so quickly the screen lagged. The form asked for a reason, evidence, and preferred location. I did not write a dramatic confession. I did not accuse Morel, not yet. I wrote, "Candidate has received unofficial instructions contradicting official center reassignment. Concerned about cohort-level interference and impersonation risk. Request supervised check-in at Reserve Center." Then I attached a screenshot of Morel's group message, blurred no names, and chose North Bank Reserve Hall because in my first life I had passed it on the bus while crying too hard to breathe. It was small, ugly, and used for overflow candidates with irregular documentation. No one bragged about sitting an exam at North Bank. No one would follow me there for status. The confirmation arrived at 4:46 with a red security watermark and an instruction that felt like a hand closing around my wrist. Do not disclose this reassignment to other candidates. Report directly to reserve registration. This notice supersedes all prior center allocations. I saved it, printed it at the convenience shop next to the station, and folded it into the lining of my bag like a passport out of a burning country. By 5:20, my phone was a nest of messages. The class chat had turned frantic and obedient at the same time, which is the ugliest combination fear can make. Where are you? Has anyone checked the portal? Morel says not to log in because it may trigger duplicate attendance. My father says official portals don't work like that. Morel says her board contact confirmed Halden. Someone posted a laughing sticker. Someone else wrote, "If Liana goes somewhere else, should we follow her?" Then Morel answered before I could, "Liana gets anxious. Don't let her panic confuse you. I'll handle attendance verification at Halden." That sentence told me everything. She was watching for me. In the first life, she had needed my presence at Halden because my old route map helped make me the scapegoat. If I stayed away, the story changed. In this life, she would either drag me there with guilt or make my absence look like proof I had knowingly misled them. I typed no reply. I left the chat muted, switched off read receipts, and bought a black umbrella from the shop even though the rain had softened to mist. At 5:37, a private message appeared from Morel herself. "Liana, don't do something selfish. Everyone is already stressed. Come to Halden so we can fix this together." I almost smiled at the word selfish. It was always selfish, apparently, to step out of the path of someone else's knife. North Bank Reserve Hall sat behind an abandoned post office, squeezed between a tire shop and a clinic with peeling blue paint. There were no banners, no parent photographers, No television crew waiting to film top scorers entering with determined faces. A handwritten paper taped to the door said National Qualifying Exam, irregular check-in, and a woman with silver hair sat behind a folding table, stamping forms with the calmness of someone who had seen every kind of panic and found all of it mildly boring. I arrived at 6:08. She looked at my card, then at my face, then at a tablet screen. "You're the security reassignment," she said. "Phone off. Bag and locker. You'll wait in room 2 until the chief proctor confirms no duplicate attendance at previous centers." My throat tightened around the word duplicate. "Has someone tried to check in under my name?" I asked. The woman's expression did not change, but one eyebrow shifted by the width of a secret. "We don't discuss live irregularities." She slid a visitor badge toward me, then added, softly enough that only I could hear, "You were right not to go to Halden." That one sentence nearly broke me, not because it was kind, but because it proved I had not imagined the trap. In my first life, everyone had made me feel foolish for insisting the door had been locked before we arrived, that the posted seal looked wrong, that Morel had known too much and cried too cleanly. Now a stranger behind a folding table had confirmed more truth than my whole academy ever had. Room 2 had 6 desks, 1 wall clock, and a window facing the tire shop's alley. I sat alone beneath the fluorescent light while the exam world rearranged itself without me. At 6:40, the exact time Morel had ordered everyone to meet, my phone was sealed in a locker, but I could imagine the scene at Halden with cruel clarity. The cohort gathered under umbrellas, Morel in her cream coat, boys from Section A pretending not to be scared, girls from the honors dorm whispering that the portal probably had glitched. At 6:55, Gate 9 would remain closed. At 7 o'clock, the guard with the mango slices would tell them there was no sitting there. At 7:05, Morel would insist the staff had made an error. At 7:10, someone would finally notice the old seal. At 7:15, the crowd would surge toward taxis and buses and desperate guesses, but the real centers would be closing registration. In my first life, I had stood among them until 7:32, frozen by Morel's certainty, then run until my lungs burned. I reached East Meridian at 8:04, 24 minutes after late entry closed. The proctor barely looked at me. "You are recorded absent," he said, and the world ended without raising its voice. This time, at 7:20, the silver-haired registrar entered room 2 and placed a fresh answer booklet on my desk. "You've been cleared," she said. "No duplicate check-in under your name. Begin at 7:30. You'll receive the full time." I wanted to ask whether the others had made it. I wanted to ask whether Morel was screaming yet. Instead, I picked up my pencil and wrote my name slowly, perfectly, in the box that belonged to me. The exam itself was almost disappointingly ordinary. After 2 lifetimes of terror, I expected the questions to glow with destiny. They did not. The first section asked about administrative law principles, the second about statistical interpretation, the third about ethics in public resource allocation. I had prepared for all of it once, then lost the chance to prove it. My hands shook through the first page, not from uncertainty, but from grief arriving late, like a guest who had missed the funeral and still wanted to be seated. Then something settled. Outside the window, a mechanic rolled tires across wet pavement. Somewhere in the building, a printer coughed. The wall clock clicked with the stubborn patience of objects that do not care who has been wronged. I answered question after question, and with each page, I felt less like a dead girl borrowing time and more like a living woman spending it properly. There was a case study about fraudulent reliance on unofficial notices. I almost laughed. The prompt described a candidate who ignored official instructions after a peer circulated a false update. Discuss liability, reliance, and institutional duty. I wrote for 3 pages. I did not mention Morel by name, of course. I did not need to. Some truths are stronger when they wear legal clothing. When the exam ended at 11:30, the registrar returned my bag with both hands, as if it contained something fragile. My phone lit up the moment I powered it on. The group chat had become a battlefield after a flood. Hundreds of messages stacked on top of each other, some furious, some pleading, some already deleting themselves. They said Halden was not active. Who told us it was Halden? Morel, where are you? East Meridian refused us after late entry. Southbridge said our names weren't there. Did anyone get in? Liana, are you seeing this? Liana, you better explain why your old route map said Halden. Then came Morel's messages, fewer but sharper. Everyone stop panicking. I am speaking with officials. Do not make statements without me. The board will investigate the center confusion. We must present a united account. United account. The phrase tasted like dust. In my first life, that united account had become a rope around my neck. This time, I screenshotted everything, including the messages she deleted too slowly, and forwarded them to the irregularities email address printed on my new admission notice. Then I walked to the bus stop outside North Bank and bought a packet of roasted chestnuts from a street vendor because in my first life I had been too poor, too afraid, and too heartbroken to eat after the exam. I never sat. They burned my fingers through the paper bag. I ate them anyway. By noon, the academy had discovered my absence from the disaster and decided that made me suspicious. My aunt called first. Where are you? She demanded before any sign that she cared whether I had actually taken the exam. Morel's mother called. She said the cohort was sent to the wrong hall because of some old material you uploaded. Why were you not with them? I watched rainwater bead on the bus window and answered with a calmness I had purchased at a terrible price. Because my official center was not Halden. Silence. Then, don't be clever with me, Liana. If everyone else followed the class arrangement, why did you sneak somewhere different? In my first life, that question had crushed me because I had no proof, no exam score, no authority willing to listen. Now I looked down at the stamped completion slip in my lap. Candidate attended. Full sitting completed. Reserve center verified. I followed the board's written instruction. I said. Anyone who told them not to was lying. My aunt inhaled sharply, offended not by the lie, but by my refusal to bend around it. Morel is a good girl. She wouldn't risk everyone's future. There it was, the oldest law of our academy. Good girls with rich parents did not commit fraud. Poor girls with scholarship shoes caused confusion. The disciplinary summons arrived before sunset, which told me the board was moving faster than it had in my first life. It ordered me to appear Monday morning for a preliminary inquiry into coordinated center misinformation affecting Halden, East Meridian, and Southbridge candidates. The wording was careful, but the attachment was not. It contained a list of candidates who had presented at wrong or inactive halls, and beside their names sat status codes: late, absent, non-compliant, under review. Morel's name was there. Status: active investigation. Mine was not. I read that list 3 times while sitting on the edge of my narrow dorm bed. Across the hall, girls were crying into phones. Someone slammed a door. Someone shouted that the board would have to grant a mass resit because too many students were affected. That was what they believed in my first life too, right until the board decided granting a resit would admit weakness. This time, however, they had something sharper than inconvenience. They had a pattern: a top student instructing candidates to ignore official notices, a wrong hall marked by an outdated seal, a forged memo spreading through shared channels, and one candidate who quietly changed centers after reporting interference. Me. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt the old fear pacing inside my ribs, looking for a door. Morel had never needed truth to win. She needed sympathy, pressure, and a scapegoat. By Monday, she would come for me properly. She came sooner. At 9:14 that night, someone knocked on my dorm door with the rhythm of authority. 3 hard taps, 1 pause, 2 softer taps. When I opened it, Morel stood in the corridor wearing a white cardigan and no makeup, a calculated choice that made her look young enough to forgive and fragile enough to protect. Behind her hovered 6 students from the cohort, including 2 who had signed statements against me in my first life. Their faces were pale with anger and desperation. Morel looked past me into my room, searching for evidence or weakness. "We need to talk," she said. "No," I replied, and began to close the door. Her hand shot out, palm flat against the wood. The hallway went still. "Liana, if you make this ugly, everyone suffers." The board is already trying to blame student miscommunication. If we all say the old Halden route came from your study materials by accident, they may grant leniency. You attended separately, so you won't lose anything. You can help the rest of us. I looked at the students behind her. Some would have mocked me yesterday for eating alone. Some had forwarded Morel's orders without question. Now they stared at me as if I owed them my name as a bandage. You want me to say I caused the confusion? I said. Morel's lips trembled. A beautiful tremble. Practiced but still effective. I want you to say it wasn't intentional. That protects everyone. Everyone except me. You already sat the exam, she whispered, and there it was, the real accusation. I had survived without permission. In my first life, I had argued in hallways like that until I sounded guilty from exhaustion. This time, I stepped back, opened my door wider, and pointed at the small black camera clipped above my desk. Before you continue, I said, my room records audio after lights out because of a theft complaint I filed last week. That was not true in the first life. It was true now because I had filed the complaint at 5:02 a.m., right after changing centers, using the same portal window and the same fear that had finally learned to be useful. The students behind Morel shifted. One boy muttered, "You're recording us?" Morel's expression changed so quickly most people would have missed it. The trembling vanished. Her eyes went flat. That's illegal. Academy policy allows recording inside my assigned room after documented harassment, I said. The hall notice is posted by the stairs. You walked into range. Her hand left the door. For the first time since I had known her, Morel looked unsure whether the floor beneath her was real. I leaned closer and lowered my voice. I already gave the board your messages. I gave them the deleted ones too. If you want to ask me to take blame, send it in writing. She stepped back as if I had slapped her. Then she turned, gathering the others with a single wounded look, and walked away slowly enough to seem dignified. The moment she disappeared around the corner, my knees nearly failed. I closed the door, locked it, and sat on the floor until the shaking passed. Monday's inquiry took place in the old library, which smelled of dust, leather, and expensive fear. The board had arranged 3 long tables in a U-shape beneath portraits of founders who looked personally offended by student misconduct. Candidates sat along the back wall with guardians, advisors, and lawyers if they could afford them. Morel arrived with both parents, a private solicitor, and a face so calm it made the room rearrange itself around her. I arrived alone because my aunt said attending would make us look combative. The silver-haired registrar from North Bank sat near the front with a folder labeled Reserve Center Incident Log. When she saw me, she gave the smallest nod. That nod held me upright. The chair of the inquiry, Deputy Commissioner Wan, began by explaining that the board was not investigating missed buses, bad weather, or confusion. It was investigating deliberate contradiction of official center allocations and possible fabrication of an unauthorized attendance memo. As she spoke, assistants distributed copies of the fake memo that had sent the cohort to Halden. My old route map appeared on page 2, but this time the file metadata was printed beneath it. Created by m.voss_admin. Modified by class monitor shared. Uploaded 3:58 a.m. My breath caught. In the first life, those lines had been missing. Or rather, someone had made sure I never saw them. This time, because I reported the interference before the exam, the board preserved the chain before Morel could scrub it. Morel's solicitor stood first. He was smooth, silver-haired, and clearly accustomed to turning guilt into misunderstanding. He argued that high-performing students under pressure had relied on unofficial peer networks because the board's emergency reassignment process was confusing. He said Morel had acted in good faith based on information available to her. He said the old map had circulated widely and no single candidate should be blamed. Then Deputy Commissioner Wan asked him why Morel's administrative login had accessed 46 candidate allocation summaries at 3:42 a.m., 18 minutes before the fake memo was uploaded. The room changed temperature. Morel's mother whispered something sharp. Her father leaned forward. The solicitor blinked once, then said they did not accept the characterization of the login as hers. Juan clicked a remote. A screen behind her showed a security capture from the Academy computer lab. Morel sitting at Terminal 7, hair braided over one shoulder, face lit by the monitor, while the timestamp glowed in the corner. The recording had no sound, but it did not need sound. We watched her insert a staff access card, open the candidate allocation table, and photograph the screen with her phone. Someone behind me whispered, "Oh my God." I did not turn around. I watched Morel watch herself become evidence. Her first defense collapsed, so she reached for the second. Tears. "I was trying to help," she said, rising before her solicitor could stop her. Her voice broke with perfect timing. Everyone was terrified. The portal showed different centers for different students. I thought Halden was the common point, because Liana's materials said it was the original center. I never meant for anyone to miss the exam. In my first life, that speech would have worked because people prefer a noble mistake to an ugly truth. This time, Deputy Commissioner Juan opened another file. Candidate Voss, at 4:19 a.m., you received your own center reassignment to East Meridian. At 4:23, you logged into the Academy system. At 4:31, you messaged the cohort not to trust individual center changes. At 4:46, Candidate Marrow requested a security reassignment after receiving your message. At 5:03, you privately instructed Candidate Marrow to present at Halden. Explain how you believed individual center changes were false when you had already opened and acknowledged your own. Morel's lips parted. Nothing came out. Her father stood and demanded a recess. Juan denied it. The room breathed in and did not breathe out. I looked at Morel, not with hatred exactly, but with the terrible recognition of someone seeing a magician caught with the dove still in her sleeve. Then came the moment she tried to give me back my old life. "Liana set me up," Morel said. It was quiet at first, almost tender, then louder. "She knew I would try to coordinate the cohort because I always do. She changed centers secretly, let everyone go to Halden, and now she's pretending to be a victim. Why would she request a security reassignment unless she planned this?" Several candidates turned toward me, hungry for a version of the story that made their own choices less humiliating. My hands tightened around the folder in my lap, but before I could stand, the silver-haired registrar did. Candidate Marrow's reassignment request included a screenshot of Candidate Voss instructing students to disregard official notices, she said. It was filed before the wrong center gathering. It triggered reserve supervision specifically to avoid contact with the group. She also did not send any center instruction to other candidates after that time. One added, furthermore, Candidate Marrow's old route map was private until copied through an unauthorized staff credential. We have no evidence that she distributed the fake memo. We have evidence that Candidate Voss did. I had imagined Vindication as a firework, bright and loud. In reality, it was quieter than that. It was a locked door opening from the other side. It was the absence of a weight I had carried so long I had mistaken it for part of my body. The cohort did not become sorry all at once. People rarely do. First they became confused, then embarrassed, then angry at the person nearest to blame. Some turned on Morel immediately, demanding why she told them not to check the portal. Others turned on the board, saying the reassignment system should have been clearer. A few looked at me with resentment, because surviving a trap can make the trapped feel accused. During the recess, a girl named Hannah approached me near the water station. In my first life, she had testified that I seemed nervous and controlling on exam morning, though we had barely spoken. Now she stood with red eyes and a paper cup crushed in her hand. "You could have warned us," she said. The old Liana would have apologized. The dead Liana would have explained until her throat bled. I looked at Hannah and said, "I did not know who was helping her." She flinched. "I wasn't. You followed her. Everyone did." That was the problem. She stared at me as if I had said something cruel. Maybe I had, but cruelty, I had learned, was not always in the sentence. Sometimes it was in the fact that truth arrived too late to comfort anyone. By evening, the preliminary findings were posted on the board's secure portal. Candidates who had ignored official center allocations after receiving valid notices were marked absent pending individual appeal. Candidates who distributed or relied on the fake memo were flagged for integrity review. Morel Voss was suspended from all board examinations for 5 years pending final misconduct determination, with recommendation for permanent disqualification from scholarship-sponsored pathways. Her academy leadership awards were frozen. Her student council office was sealed. Her family solicitor announced they would appeal, which meant the story would stretch through newspapers, parent forums, and every hallway in Halewick Academy until her name no longer sounded like excellence. My status line was one sentence: candidate completed exam under supervised reserve conditions. No adverse finding. I read it in the laundry room because it was the only place nobody thought to look for me. Machines churned around me, washing other people's uniforms clean. I leaned against the dryer and laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because the world had finally written a sentence about me that did not end in blame. The final twist came 3 weeks later, on results day. In my first life, I had avoided campus when the merit list was posted because seeing names on paper felt like pressing my face against a window to watch other people eat. This time, I arrived early. Not dramatically. No red dress, no perfect hair, no crowd-parting entrance. I wore my old navy coat and carried a paper cup of tea that went cold before I drank it. The merit board stood beneath the cedar trees outside the administration building, guarded by 2 staff members because the center scandal had made everyone afraid of paper. Students gathered in tight clusters. Some candidates from the Halden disaster had been granted individual appeals if they proved they had checked the portal and attempted to reach the correct centers before closure, but most had not. They had trusted Morel all the way to the wrong hall, and trust, the board decided, was not a substitute for compliance. When the glass doors opened, the crowd surged forward. I stayed back. I had spent one life chasing lists. I could wait 30 seconds for one to come to me. My name was 9th. Not first, not legendary, not high enough for the academy to pretend they had always believed in me. 9th. High enough for admission to the National Administrative College. High enough for scholarship renewal. High enough to make every whispered accusation sound ridiculous in hindsight. I stared at Liana Marrow until the letters blurred. Someone behind me gasped, "She actually passed." I turned and saw Hannah, along with 3 others from the cohort, looking at me with a stunned expression of people who had expected my survival to be temporary. Before any of them could speak, a black car stopped near the curb, and Morel stepped out with her father. She looked smaller without her council pin. Her braid was gone, her hair cut blunt at her shoulders, her face pale in a way no makeup could turn elegant. The crowd shifted, making room not out of respect but curiosity. Morel walked to the merit board, saw the gap where her name should have been, then saw mine. For 1 second, pure hatred moved across her face, naked and childish. Then the cameras from the student paper turned toward her, and she folded it into sorrow. "Congratulations," she said to me, voice thin enough to snap. "You must be proud." I thought of the bus station bathroom, the wrong gate, the shop floor where I died in another spring. "No," I said. "I'm awake." Her father demanded a meeting with the headmaster. Morel tried to follow him inside, but the security officer at the door stopped her and asked for visitor clearance. That should not have mattered, but it did. In our academy, Morel had once entered every room as if walls recognized her. Now even doors asked who she was. I watched her stand outside the administration building while rain began to fall through the cedar branches, darkening the shoulders of her cream coat. Around us, the cohort pretended not to stare. Some of them had failed. Some had appealed. Some would retake next year with a stain on their files and a cautionary story attached to their names. I did not enjoy that as much as I had imagined. They were not innocent, but they had also been trained, as I had, to worship certainty when it wore a pretty face. The difference was that I had paid for that lesson with a life. They paid with a year. When Hannah finally whispered, "I'm sorry," I did not forgive her. Not then. Forgiveness felt too expensive to hand out in the rain. But I nodded once, because I knew the shape of regret when it was real enough to stand without witnesses. The board's final hearing happened in a smaller room with no portraits and no audience, which somehow made it more frightening. There was no crowd for Morel to perform to, no cohort to tremble behind, no parents whispering that the system could not afford to punish someone like her. Just the deputy commissioner, 2 exam integrity officers, Morel, her solicitor, and me because my report had become part of the evidence bundle. I did not have to speak unless called, but Morel kept looking at me as if my silence was another crime. The integrity officer read the findings in a flat voice: unauthorized access to candidate center data, creation of a misleading memo using a copied private map, instruction to disregard official notices, attempted post-incident coercion of another candidate, and false statement during preliminary inquiry. Each charge landed without drama, but I could feel her life rearranging around the words. When they asked if she had anything final to say, Morel did not cry. That surprised me more than the tears ever had. She sat very straight, hands folded, and said, "I did what leaders do when systems fail. I made a decision." For a moment, I almost admired the arrogance. Then she added, "If Liana had shared her reassignment instead of hiding, everyone would have reached the correct place." The commissioner removed her glasses and looked at Morel with a tiredness that felt older than the building. Candidate Marrow was specifically instructed not to disclose a security reassignment after reporting interference. Your argument remains that a candidate you were attempting to misdirect should have trusted you with her protected location. Morel's mouth tightened. No answer came. The final order took less than 5 minutes to read. Permanent disqualification from that year's national examination cycle. 5-year bar from board-administered scholarships and leadership endorsements. Referral to the academy for separate disciplinary proceedings. The word permanent did not sound loud. It sounded final, which is much worse. The academy expelled her the following Friday, though they called it withdrawal under exceptional circumstances because rich families prefer velvet words for iron doors. Her portrait vanished from the student council wall before lunch. Her name disappeared from the scholarship display by evening. Teachers who had praised her for years began using careful phrases like unfortunate judgment and pressure-related misconduct, as if fraud were a fever she had caught from the weather. The cohort learned to speak of Halden in fragments. Some said they had been manipulated. Some said they had only followed the class monitor, because everyone else did. A few still insisted Morel must have had a reason, because admitting they had trusted a liar meant admitting they had helped sharpen the blade aimed at me. I did not chase apologies. That was another freedom I had not expected. In my first life, I begged people to understand me because I thought understanding was the doorway back into humanity. In my second, I discovered that some doors are not worth entering even when they open. I spent my afternoons rebuilding my study notes, filing copies of every official notice, and sitting in the far corner of the library where the windows looked over the bus loop. Every time bus 17 wheezed past the gate, I remembered the wrong morning and felt less afraid of it. Still, victory did not make me softer immediately. For weeks, I startled whenever someone said my name behind me. I checked the exam portal even after results were final. I saved emails in 3 different drives. When the National College sent my admission packet, I read the center address, enrollment address, housing address, and orientation address 5 times each, then called the office to confirm like a person who had learned that paper could be forged by smiling hands. The clerk on the phone laughed kindly and said, "Miss Marrow, you are on the list." I had to press my palm against my mouth to keep from crying. Being on a list should have been ordinary. For me, it felt like being returned to the world. That night, I walked past the academy gate alone and saw a younger student staring at the new integrity notice posted by security. Candidates must follow only individual board-issued instructions. Peer-circulated center notices are invalid. She looked confused, nervous, and painfully familiar. I almost kept walking. Then I stopped and said, "Screenshot your portal. Trust the watermark. If someone tells you not to check, check twice." She blinked at me, then nodded. Maybe that was the only kind of revenge worth keeping. Not ruining the liar forever, but leaving fewer doors open for the next one. Months later, after I moved into the National Administrative College dormitory, I found the old Halden admission card at the bottom of my suitcase. I had kept it without meaning to, tucked between winter socks and a cracked notebook from my first academy year. The paper had softened at the corners. Gate 9. Seat D22. A dead path printed in black ink. I sat on the floor of my new room, listening to unfamiliar students laugh in the hallway, and considered throwing it away. Instead, I pinned it above my desk beside the North Bank completion slip. Not as a trophy. Not as proof that I had defeated morale. I kept it because every future has two addresses: the place people tell you to go, and the place the truth is quietly waiting. In my first life, I followed the loudest voice and arrived at a locked gate. In my second, I trusted the small official line nobody else wanted to read, changed centers without applause, and sat the exam in an ugly reserve hall behind a tire shop. That was not glamorous. It did not look like destiny. But when the cohort followed the top student into the wrong hall and found nothing there but old tape, a board guard, and last year's seal, I was already writing my answers under fluorescent lights, one page at a time, building a life no one else could redirect.